There's a lot of different kind of choices. The meta is very flexible around the world. Hello and welcome to Vision Denial. My name is Sam, and if you're new here, well, congratulations, you found quite a good set of videos. But I watch every single playoff asterisk of every international region who participate in international Riot-sanctioned tournaments. Asterisk because the LEC has a format that I would rather just pull my hair through. That said, let's take a look at this week's set of games. For context, we're going to be looking over the games that happened between March 26th through March 31st. And that includes, we bring back the LPL! And the games are so much better. Gives me a context here that at least like the range of quality from these particular regions is staggeringly low compared to other seasons. But time, like there's enough time that's going to come by, right? Give it the chance to slowly improve. Because looking just the comparison, the lowest 4 seeds of the LPL give you more confidence on whoever the 2 teams they're going to send than every other region, whatever they've got going. So without further ado, let's get the chance to look over the particular series in question, all 12 of them that I've watched. And then let's go over some of my thoughts. We head off to still round 3 of the... Round 3? No, it's still round 2. Yeah, round 2 in the upper bracket of the Korean LCK. We got ourselves Gen.G versus Hanwah Esports. And this is the strongest showing so far from a team. Hanwah still have a chance in the lower bracket, but even if they win against KT Oysters, I don't think it'll go further than that. Strong vision play and a nice coordination doesn't help with the lack of agency or ability to play the early game. A team that relies on mistakes made from their opponent is not one that I can hold confidence in being able to succeed. Gen.G, for their part, showed to be the strongest closing team so far, properly recognizing when they're able to close out the game and not waste time. They have strong vision application, excellent understanding of their win conditions, coordination is really up there, early game, excellent. But then we get to the questionable in-game choices. The over-aggressive engages and skirmishes, not knowing exactly what the limits are, and it helps sometimes when trying to get leads and your opponent is caught unaware. But Hanwah called you out, guys. Often this slowed down the game where it didn't need to be slowed down, and that's something that concerns me as you go up against the ultimate give an inch and take a mile team in T1. My MVP for the series is Delight, who really enabled his whole team to freaking shine. He's just really fucking good at starting fights. Holy crap. Alright, here's the final one from round 1 in the lower bracket of the PCS. We've got Deep Cross Gaming versus Team Bliss. This format was a mistake. And honestly, just a humiliation for the LCO teams as a whole. For one, I commend Team Bliss for the variety of draft and the vision play that they had on display. They understand their fundamentals and win conditions, but let's be real. The coordination, skill difference, and lack of agency, as well as the lack of preparation, is just not there for this region. And facing off the PCS was just going to be rough from the first minute of the games. Deep Cross Gaming, for their part, played this like it was just an easy exhibition match, with nearly nothing at stake. The vision was poor, the pacing bizarre, very awkward individual mistakes made for the sake of an easier approach to the game overall. The worst part is that these series probably don't reflect the actual preparation Deep Cross Gaming had to make. I'm hoping to see a better set of games from these following series of the region, or be disappointed / worried for whoever qualifies. Because if this is what it is, the PCS is not going to do well. My MVP for the series is Hanwah, who played his happy little game in the top side, unbothered. Man, choosing an MVP for this series is like giving a participation trophy. So, yeah. It's time to head back to the CBLOL from Brazilian League. We're in the upper bracket still with Loud versus Los Grandes. This so far has been the most unimpressive series out of the region. Not from a standpoint of it being bad. It's from the standpoint, this is fairly standard as what is expected from the region. Very one-note drafts with very little adaptation, solid vision, but used inconsistently, using neutrals to push the state of the game forward instead of using side lane pressures to balloon leads, over-committing on fights, and games entirely decided from the impact of one lane. By all accounts, these teams are fine from the region, but from what I've seen from Pain Gaming and Furia, I'm not confident for either of these teams that really need to clean up how they approach their neutral objectives and use leads to actually just choke out resources and balloon the gold instead of just stagnating and waiting for the next neutral fights. Loud was better at it, given as much as they've won from it, but not by much, really relying on Robo, who gets my MVP as he absorbed so much pressure while still wrecking, had it blow for blow at all stages of every single game. Tale as old as time, CLG and Faith. Alright, we're going to move on from that. It's the North American LCS in the lower bracket from the second match here. In round one, we've got Evil Geniuses versus CLG. Well, as impressive as they may have looked in their previous series, in this one, CLG has just shown two things. They understand how to place vision and manipulate side lanes. And even though it's not consistent, over and over, I'm watching just wondering, where did the coordination go? The drafts are questionable, the vision is inefficient, the team fight's disjointed, individual mistakes alone costing a whole game. Compared to Evil Geniuses, who look like they should be in the upper bracket, to a point where it wouldn't even surprise me to see them make the semifinals and heck, the finals also. Also, just honestly, based on how Evil Geniuses does against Golden Guardians, I might be poised to think they take the whole thing. Just on the team coordination, or just on the team fight coordination, the equally solid vision play and neutral approach, they're great. My issue, I have them at least from this series, is there's a lot of questionable decisions and overuse of risky baits and switches to get a leg up in the matches. Just kind of limit that shit, guys. Hard to give an MVP but the most consistent player here, at least to my eyes, was FBI, who kept his damage up as much as possible while minimizing his risk. Oh boy, this was almost a reverse sweep. We return to the Latin American LLA in the upper bracket semifinals, where we've got 6 Karma versus Rainbow 7, 6 Karma making it to the finals. This series was an exciting mess. From both sides, we had moments of brilliance regarding neutrals, drafts, vision play, and teamfight coordination. But we mostly got a mess regarding decision-making and overcommitting and coin flips. This series was poised to be a 3-0 from 6 Karma, who honestly looked like the stronger team overall. They hold more consistent approaches to the fundamentals and made fewer bad calls. The issue comes from when the bad calls did happen, which were at key moments of any game, allowing Rainbow 7 to just waltz in, steal a neutral, nullify any siege attempts, get better flanks for team fights. Rainbow 7, however, showed little agency until it was way too late in each game. Much of their wins can be attributed to waiting for 6 Karma to make a huge mistake. Granted, I do prefer their approach to neutral setups, even if they weren't always the first to the objective. Both teams will need to clean up and improve the way that they play with their leads, and then I could see either team having a chance at MSI. But at this moment, my MVP for the series goes to Cody, who keeps being a madman with how he controls space in these team fights. Pretty solid. Off we go. Jeez. Whew. In the Latin America's LLA, the third round in the lower bracket, we've got Estral Esports versus Impunity Esports. I never thought I would rather watch D plus Kia's late game nonsense, but this is by far the worst. This is the worst winning team we have on the roster, gentlefolk. Impunity had the better vision, more flexible draft, more consistent early game, better closing of any given game, played better from behind, and hopefully a better showing in the summer. But for now, here we are. Estral, a team that no matter how big their lead will still take 3 parent dances, 2 elder drakes, and a lot of heart attacks to even get the win. Part of me wishes with all my heart that in no way does Rainbow 7 or 6 Karma, either or, let this team even think they have a chance at MSI. Not only is the use of leads really rough, the whole approach to neutrals, vision as a whole, coordination, individual decision making have me questioning a lot. If it wasn't for Takeover or Hanwah D, in many of these engages, I would just be left baffled as to how this team manages around Jose Deodo's over-eager engages or Paz's poor position. And don't get me wrong, the talent is there, but not the team. You got at least one best of 5 to change my mind. My MVP goes to Hanwah D for being the most consistent player of the team. We're in China with the first playoff series of the LPL. We've got ourselves Royal Never Give Up, the King of Spring versus Thunder Talk Gaming, their first series. We're going to be real, right? This was a 3-0 series, right? We can just ignore the first game. Because that game showed a Thunder Talk that held strong coordination, good neutral play, and understanding of their win conditions. Then the next 3 games happen, and while those things stay true for Thunder Talk Gaming, the Royals outplayed the early game, hold stronger neutral setups, significantly stronger vision, I mean by significantly stronger, non-stop aggression, and a much better drafting sense. I do think that this version of Royal Never Give Up is not quite enough to clinch a spot for MSI and to try to defend their title. The first game is really hard to ignore, especially when signs of it bleed into the other 3 games. Way and Breathe, especially, are frequently playing a game of their own. And while ahead, it produces solid results, but when even or even behind, you wind up seeing the remaining 3 members of the Royals having to pull double time for their shenanigans. My MVP for this series is Gala, who pulled triple time just to assure the fights and pressure remained in the Royals' court. Alright, first match of this round 2 of the upper bracket for Southeast Asia's PCS. We've got ourselves CTBC Flying Oyster versus Frank Esports, and it's the first reverse sweep of the season. Both of these teams are super close in terms of approach. The big notable factors are that 1, Frank Esports are stronger team fighters with more flexible drafts, but that will often lead them to make ridiculous drafts that stink and hurt them. While 2, the Flying Oysters play stronger vision and neutral approaches, but as such tend to also slow down the game in ways that are not helpful to them in scaling disadvantaged drafts. Otherwise, both of these teams really need to work on their side lane management, avoid bizarre catches, really evaluate how they want to approach their early games. Frank, you have the chance to clean things up and return to the upper bracket. In fact, I kind of expect it, unless you find the Flying Oysters in the lower bracket, which means that it is likely going to be another tense but rough series. Heck, either of these teams I could see being the second seed if the PCS had a second seed for the MSI. But neither one of these teams inspire confidence for the region, but inspire enough for me to expect good signs from the Talons, especially how they may perform. My MVP goes to Gemini, who really enabled many of the plays for CFO, and with Slay True brought their vision game really to a head. I did not kid, they're really good vision team. It's the upper bracket semifinal from the North American LCS. We've got Cloud9 versus FlyQuest, and congratulations to Cloud9 on being the second team to qualify for MSI. Now this series only looked close on two regards: draft flexibility and vision play. Outside of that, FlyQuest looked shy, uncoordinated, and outmatched role for role. I want to see FlyQuest come back from the lower bracket, which it's looking like it will happen, to make the second seed and adapt for a more apt rematch, because the one-sided nature of this series leaves me with only worries for Cloud9 and FlyQuest alike. The drafts that Cloud9 played needed strong early leads and consistent pressure that works if you also close out the games quickly and efficiently. Cloud9 got away with a lot playing against teams that are slow and careless, but in the international scene, they're not going to likely get away with this sort of play. I want to see a faster and cleaner set of closing plays out of them and less on a reliance on the skill gaps plus passive play dead style of the LCS. My MVP for the series goes to Berserker, who had the widest skill gap for the entire team. And we head to the other side of the Chinese LPL bracket. We've got ourselves Top Esports versus World Elite. There's nothing like a good stomp to really show the strengths of a team. It's even weirder when it also shows the weaknesses itself. Now, World Elite put up one heck of a fight, but did not hold the right kind of coordinations or individual skill to supplement the kind of fight that they had going. I did like how they set up for neutral objectives and played around vision a lot more than how Top Esports did, but frequently would wind up coming short on using said leads. Speaking of, how come there is significantly less vision coverage from a team that has a 10,000 gold lead? The disjointed play, poor vision coverage, inconsistent neutral approaches, and the drafting? Top. While I can excuse the poor drafting every so often, when you're in a situation where you would absolutely be stomping the other team with zero questions asked, the fact that you lost Game 3 and you almost lost Game 1 indicates that you should be drafting to have more agency and to take things seriously. If this is the way you draft when you take things seriously, then I have some concerns for the series that you're about to embark on. My MVP for the series is Wayward, who held the largest skill gap amongst the 5 players of Top Esports. All right, we head off back to Southeast Asia's in the upper bracket. The PCS, we got Saint-Germain Talons versus Impunity Esports. First half of the Talons, whack. Second half, also whack, but with better macros. The PCS continues its long tradition of just frustrating me with aspects of each team that nails exactly what they're aiming for, but fails on all other fronts. Impunity excels in understanding their vision and teamfight setups, but when behind, they don't adjust correctly, leaving negative trades on the regular. And while they close out games a little bit better, they seem to also struggle around side lane control, which is something that the Talons seem to excel in. The PSG, let's be real, okay? Your early game amongst Seed 1s of all of the other regions is really freaking weak. But the approach to your mid and late game, especially for macro choices, had me perplexed and intrigued. The weird vision approach, it always levels to just good enough. I would rather you didn't resort to some of the macro choices when your players can't handle the matchups, but your players clearly can from the Game 5. So it's just that it's something really messed with them in the first 4 games of the series. My MVP of the series is Yubao, whose individual play on the side lanes is what created the pressures and win conditions for the second reverse sweep of the season, both of them in the PCS. We head off to the North American LCS lower bracket quarterfinals. Golden Guardians versus Evil Geniuses. Well. Can't say I expected this result. And here I am, pleased as peach. This is my favorite series for now. Evil Geniuses played the series as expected. Some strong vision and coordination, solid draft understanding, and how to approach the win conditions, adapting the plays that do and don't work, and even adapting the drafts with it. I have no complaints from the side of Evil Geniuses, really. Golden Guardians was just the better team in all of these regards and more. Now, don't get me wrong, okay? Golden Guardians didn't do anything that strike me as going to be the favorite in the international scene. But the chance at the second, if not the first seed, is real and a conversation haver. The upgrade we saw here makes me think that the team can and should compete at MSI. But I want to see if it keeps getting better with slightly more under their belt, or if this was just a one-off situation, because that happens sometimes in these playoffs. Because doing everything that Evil Geniuses can do, but better, was kind of crazy in this particular situation, because I even thought Evil Geniuses could go the entire way. My MVP for this series is River, who was a main mastermind in setting up all the kinds of plays and success for Golden Guardians. My, wasn't that interesting. Okay, let's get down to the nitty-gritty of the situation. Yeah, so like mentioned before going through all of those, the LPL is way more impressive than I expected. They've got a couple of interesting tidbits. Like there's a strong emphasis on the Rise really is baffling. No other region is even touching that champion. But also it got me really reevaluating the emphasis of certain champions across the board, including Annie. You got your Annie, your Malphite, your Maokai, your Wukong. Those 4 are surprisingly just all over the place in terms of priority, but are indicative of something interesting, which is how do you want to control the zones around neutral objectives, and how do you want to approach engaging in team fights? And those 4 champions in particular really stood out to me from because like they're not the only champions who have this kind of like focus to them, right? You got your Vi, your Ahri, your all the rest of it, but the larger difference between them is like the sheer propensity of the focus of these drafts towards those particular champions, and also because they have a large array of AoE engage tools. And because teams are terrible at side lane control and really focus over chokeholds, jungle fights, and neutral objectives, the AoE zone control and engage tools are fantastic. And so I propose the question to all of you, for every particular region you watch, and especially the ones that you really focus on, do you think that there is an overemphasis on some of these champions? And if it's not these champions, are there other ones that do the same trick for you? That there could be a deviation from it? Heck, the last series I covered, just right there, there was such a huge amount of flexibility that came from Golden Guardians' sets of drafts, and yet, somehow, Maokai was still a part of all of it. Golden Guardians had all 3 games with either a Wukong or a Maokai in the midst of it, and Annie was banned across the board. So I pass the question off to you. Do you think that AoE engages should be a higher priority in picks and bans for a lot of these teams that may not be doing so? Or is there maybe an overemphasis on it? Or is there like a nice in-between so far? Because I think there's an interesting overemphasis that doesn't need to exist, especially if you know how to manipulate the map. There needs to be engage tools, but there doesn't need to be like such a weird emphasis in either total avoidance or like total pick and control. I kind of don't want to see Maokai or Wukong ever again. I don't think it provides the same kind of tools people expect. Next on the docket is the weird all over the map quality of the games. We touched it briefly on the situation at the beginning and when talking about the different champions, but something feels different. First video I talked about how the changes to the Worlds format and how it affected the different regions across the board would have a strong impact, like in terms of the like lack of diversity of play. And now we're in a situation where I think it wasn't even just the lack, like now that we have a lack of diversity of play in international scenes or in the potential for it, but the meta have such a huge overlap where some of the focus and priorities may not be one-to-one. There is still a strong overlap with them all, and as such, I think that the quality of the play itself, it has worsened. I'm used to going year after year and being pleasantly surprised by the improvements of every region across the board, including the LCO, who I regularly would bash as being the worst, but would still improve over time. The TCL for a bit was a minor exception to the rule, but even then they would have moments of brilliance that really surprised me. And I'm here just wondering, why was my favorite series an upset from Golden Guardians playing way better than they should have? That should not be the situation at all. My favorite should be the highest of the quality of the games, but the best teams are not showing up the way that I am expecting them to. And not just they should be near perfect. No, I'm even talking about in the highest quality regards, Gen.G and T1 in their series didn't show up. Not a single team in the emerging regions showed up to the quality expected for their regions. In the LCS, Cloud9, who by all objective measurements is the favorite for the whole thing, is still not playing to a quality that feels satisfactory to an MSI that's going to be interesting, good, competitive. Because I look at the lowest seeds of the LPL and they seem to match in quality of the upper bracket of all of the regions that have played so far. Caveat. I'm not expecting the LJL to do any good, but the VCS, who regularly surprises me, that's why I love him, and the LEC have not started yet and won't be starting for quite some time. So there is a chance for them to pleasantly surprise me, or even give me some shred of hope that there is going to be somebody other than the LPL representatives to have a competitive tournament for MSI. But I am over a third done with the series, and I don't have a favorite in mind. None that are good, or even give me hope that they're a confident favorite. I don't know. That's at least from my point of view. You guys let me know from like the comments down below. The disappointment is quite there, but I am more interested in not just like the if there is an actual favorite that you have, but more like, do you find it interesting some of the focus that they have from drafts from region to region, or the very sweeping overlap? Because yes, they're all playing on the same patch, great, but that's not always the case. The overlap of meta sometimes is kind of sparse, and I want to see how all of you in the comments down below think about the what's the wording? The prolific nature of very prominent champions. Do you think it's going to change? Do you think that's like any and everything in the comments down below? I want to hear your thoughts about overuse of some champions, meta overlap, and quality of games. Thank you, everybody who watches. I greatly appreciate it. I hope you have a great time, and I'll see you next week. Have a good one.